Lord be with you.
Also with you.
So good to have you here today to see all your faces. And Brian, you showed up. That's my husband back there. So can you hear me back there? Great. All right. I am Vicar Lisa. And some of you haven't seen me in a while, in about 3 months, right? It's been that long, okay? Unless you've been watching some of the videos that we have. And so the title of this particular sermon, and I owe this, Craig Coach enjoys the titles of my sermons. So this one says, welcome, ... goodbye. And that is my gospel. That is my sermon for today. Because I'm struck with the ways in which this particular text runs parallel to what's happening within this internship and where I am at this point in my internship. Jesus has just called the 12 disciples. And we know who they are because they were just named at the beginning of this gospel in chapter 10 of Matthew. And he's telling them to be a disciple is going to be kind of rough. It's not going to be an easy road for you. There's going to be many challenges along the way. And then all of a sudden, he says goodbye to them. He gives them this little welcoming, and then what happens shortly right after where Craig ended up, we hear Jesus had finished instructing his 12 disciples, and then he went on from there teaching at the cities, proclaiming the good news. So he gives and then he leaves. My internship has been like this, where I just got here and now I'm going. And the people here at Elam were gracious in the welcoming. This past year wouldn't have been possible without the support of Zion Lutheran Church and the congregation there. It wouldn't have been possible, it wasn't even an idea a year and a half ago if it wasn't for Pastor Reba and Pastor Bruce. And then you all accepted this vision of having an intern here. We have 3 entities in this story where we have Zion, Elam, and me, who have come together for a common purpose and who have brought today's word alive. Whoever welcomes me welcomes Jesus. Whoever welcomes Jesus welcomes the one who sent him. So thank you for welcoming me into your lives for this brief time. This brief time between last July to now seemed like 3 dots. Those are the 3 dots between the welcome and the goodbye. These 3 dots, ellipses, usually appear at the end of a word that expressed a thought or a meaning that's incomplete. However, those 3 dots between the welcome and the goodbye, for the disciples and for us today, have so much more meaning behind them, and in between them, and within them. Between these small dots, there is holy space. And that is where God is filling that space with meaning, with filling it with grace, forgiveness, hope, love, peace, joy, truth, patience, justice, and comfort. People of Elam, you have welcomed me as I am, a short, enthusiastic, nervous seminarian who is learning how to be comfortable in her space at the altar and as a future pastor. And between the time you welcomed me, God filled that space. God filled that space with patience as I constantly asked questions. God filled that space with forgiveness when I moved around the tables in the fellowship hall. God filled that space with holy laughter when I would get carried away with a Bible study. God filled that space with community as I got to know Dave and Steve and Walt when we redid the nursery. God filled that space with hope as you shared your hopes for all a brighter future. God filled that space with peace and comfort as you shared your pain and suffering. Those 3 dots seemed really close up until the March when COVID-19 hit. And now those 3 dots seem to have 6 feet apart. And the distance seems so far. And yet I believe that in that space, God is still creating holy space with you and with others. We can't see what God is doing in those spaces until we've arrived at a new place, where we are welcomed again, where we rest on that dot. And then the Holy Spirit tells you and shows you the ways in which God had filled that space. People of Elam, you have shaped me in new ways. You have carved the round edges of my dots into a heart shape. You have showed me a new understanding how God is shaping our dots into hearts and filling those spaces in between. Those spaces between the welcome, ... goodbye. Nowadays, I'm struck with when you go into a public space, you have to stand on a dot. Yeah? So as you're standing on that dot, it begins to, the text comes alive in that space for me. What if instead of thinking of those dots as our personal bubbles that we need to protect, what if we imagine those dots as hearts? What if we stand in those spaces and look around at God's creation and verbally spread out love rather than judgment? What if we see those heart dots not as our space, but God's space, where we lift up silent prayers for our fellow human beings? What if we stand on those heart dots and remind ourselves that Jesus Christ will never abandon us and continually pours out grace and love to us so that we pour out grace and love for all God's creation through our actions? God is not finished writing our stories. You have 3 dots at the end of your name. Tomorrow, God willing, you will wake up to a new day with a sunny welcome, followed by today you will ... So how will you live your dots as Christians in this world? So we've gone from the welcome to the dots and now the goodbyes. My dad, he loves to tell the origin of a word. Okay? And so he's passed on this tradition of my curiosity to how we came up with the word goodbye. Where did that come from? Well, goodbye is actually a contraction of God be with ye. Goodbye means God be with ye. Doesn't that give a different ring to the word goodbye? It's like you're bestowing a blessing every time you say a goodbye to somebody else. And so, I say to you, goodbye as an intern. Rather, may God bless, may God be with ye. And may you allow God to fill your dots with love and unending grace that pours out into this world when we need to feel the love rather than feeling in our bubbles. Thank you, people of Elam. Thank you for your time.